This started when I was at my childhood friend's apartment for what was supposed to be a fun movie night. We hadn't hung out in a while and we were catching up. Her place was cozy, maybe a little disorganized, and full of girly decor. We were in our comfiest sweatpants about to watch princess movies. Her apartment isn't the most tidy. Things are a bit scattered around, but it's clean and so authentic, which always made me feel at home. We decided ordering pizza for dinner. She mentioned that Sherwood, someone I hadn't met yet, would bring over the pizza. At first, I wasn't happy to hear that. I thought that meant she had invited other friends, like a boy, over to join us, which wasn't what I had in mind, but I was in for a surprise. Sherwood turned out to be just our delivery guy for the night. He wasn't joining us. When he got to the apartment, there was this awkward air about him. He was obviously nervous, fumbling a bit with the pizza boxes, and not quite making eye contact. My friend introduced us quickly, and it was clear from her overly thankful demeanor that Sherwood did a lot more for her than just fetch dinner. After handing us the pizza, there was this brief moment of forced small talk. My friend was super nice to him, despite his awkwardness. He wasn't the best at conversation, and honestly seemed really out of place. Then Sherwood asked me for my number. I was in a tough spot because our mutual friend was sitting right there, so I just gave it to him. Yeah, we chatted for maybe 5 minutes before my friend gave him a cue to leave with something like, "Hey, thanks so much for dropping this off." He seemed to get the hint. We both gave him a hug before my friend said something like, "Drive safe," giving him another kind of cue to leave. When I asked my friend what that was all about, she basically explained that Sherwood was her unpaid personal assistant. He did her grocery shopping, and he dropped her off pizza, and he did all this other stuff. I think Sherwood was just a really lonely guy desperate for interaction, especially female interaction. My friend and I were both young and immature back then. We were about 23, but I think we knew something was seriously wrong with Sherwood. It was a little hard to articulate because we couldn't point out exactly what his problem was. He started a group chat with me and my friend. He just sent a meme or two every week. It felt like he was trying to stay relevant without being intrusive. Maybe he was used to being sidelined or even blocked by other girls in the past. I felt like he was trying to make me remember him, but also carefully not trying to give me a reason to block him. I can't speak on his behalf. That's just what it felt like. He also offered help with my errands. The first time I said thanks for asking, but no. He then asked every weekend after that. One day, I made the mistake of accepting his help. I should have known better. I had recently found a great deal for a new washing machine on Craigslist, but I had no idea how to pick it up and install it. When I mentioned it in the chat, he excitedly volunteered to take care of the whole thing. He handled the whole pickup and installation like a champ, which saved me so much hassle. I tried to pay him for his efforts because I wanted to show appreciation, but he wouldn't accept any money. I insisted. He suggested that I could just repay him by joining him for a hike. Like, what? I was uneasy about this. It felt a bit too personal and almost like it could be mistaken for a date. But Sherwood framed it as nothing more than a friendly outing, like a transaction to balance out the favor. I agreed to the hike. I rationalized it by telling myself it was a fair trade for installing the washing machine, and that it was genuinely a form of payment, especially since I didn't think he had too many friends. This hike felt like maybe a way for him to have some companionship. I thought it might be nice to help him. Part of me was still uneasy about spending time with him in such an isolated setting though. The day of the hike, Sherwood picked the trail that was nearby. I had been there before. It's actually gorgeous. As we walked along together, he chatted about ordinary things like work, the weather, and his hobbies. Everything seemed normal until he suggested that we go off the main path to see something special that he wanted to share. Like, what could that even mean? We reached a secluded spot, and there, oh my gosh, was a dead body. My heart pounded so violently as Sherwood stood there, so eerily calm and nonchalant. The casualness in his demeanor made me feel even more uneasy. I felt like he wasn't just showing me a dead body, but also revealing this darker side of himself. It smelled bad, but not like in the movies. I didn't know how long he had been there. I'm not a biologist, but my guess is that it had smelled a lot worse before, but now it's gone down. At that moment, I mumbled some excuse about needing to get back quickly and started walking briskly towards the main path. I was urging him to follow me. I thought that maybe this was some twisted mind game, like a way to intimidate me, or show that he wasn't just some harmless little boy. Maybe he was trying to send a message that said, "You should know I'm familiar with things like this." Or there's another possibility. Maybe he just wanted me to think about it more. Sometimes when I talk to people, I feel like they only notice me for the time that we're together, and then they won't think of me again until the next time we meet. And maybe he thought showing me a dead body would make him less forgettable. I have no idea. But on the surface, he seemed oblivious to how inappropriate this was. As we walked back together, I was in full fight or flight mode, instinctively looking around to see if there were other hikers or rangers, anyone who could make me feel like I wasn't alone. The moment I spotted someone else on the trail, I called out. Not to expose Sherwood, but just asking for directions back to the parking area. I wanted to make sure Sherwood and I wouldn't be left alone together. I asked this gentleman to walk us back to the parking lot. I wasn't going to take no for an answer. I kept pretending like I was confused about his directions, and eventually he agreed to just walk us there. Getting help from that guy was my way of re-anchoring myself to safety and normality while I was still under the shock of what Sherwood had shown me. We got to the parking area. There, I called my friend and told her I was with Sherwood. I suggested he could drop me off with her and that we'd be there in 20 minutes. He agreed. That was my way of making sure that if anything happened, it was on record that Sherwood was the last person to have been with me. Also, I immediately texted my friend what had happened to get that on the record too. When I got to her apartment, we said thanks to Sherwood and kindly told him to go away. I had already told her through text, but then I started going into all the detail. The fact that the body had insects, the fact that the face was decomposing but still recognizable, etc. Her reaction was pure horror. Not just about the dead body, but also how nonchalantly he had treated the whole situation. She confessed she always sensed something was off about him, even though she'd never imagined anything this disturbing. We both agreed that we needed to remove Sherwood from our lives, but she admitted she felt stuck and she had become too reliant on him to just fire him cold turkey. We planned out how we would do it. It was this gradual phasing out plan. We would limit our interactions to times when others were present. We would slowly reduce our responses to his texts. I would never ask for his help again, and my friend would ask for less and less help. He kept texting during weekends, offering to run errands or asking if we needed anything, to which my friend would reply, "I'm trying to work on being more independent, but you have really been such a help." Eventually, as my friend started dating someone new, she introduced Sherwood to her boyfriend. He never contacted her again after that. I had called the cops on the same night of the incident, but it was a while before we heard more news about it. At least a full month later, a news report confirmed discovering a dead body in that area where Sherwood had taken me hiking. They made an arrest, not of Sherwood, but of this other guy that Sherwood followed on Instagram. I have no idea if Sherwood was connected to the murder. It was winter of 2015 and I was working at a doctor's office in Branson, Missouri. I just got a new iPhone and I was excited to try out the time-lapse mode for its camera. On my drive home from work one early evening, I decided to stop and capture the sunset over Table Rock Lake. It was a gorgeous evening and the winter sun would be setting soon. I parked my SUV at a state park entry parking lot, and mine was the only car in sight, but it didn't alarm me. I hopped out and realized how incredibly chilly it was. It was sunny, but blistering cold. I opened the back of my vehicle and put on some gloves and a better pair of shoes. Then I took off down a trail that led to the edge of the lake. I had noticed that Branson Belle showboat slowly making its way across the lake for its sunset voyage, and I thought it would be neat to capture it in the time-lapse. I was a single 31-year-old female with a lifetime of experience doing risky things on my own without consequence. The path down to the water was marked with large rocks on each side. I was in a hurry to get down to the shore and get into the recording position. I lost my footing and then I fell down hard. My head rested on a pointy-shaped big rock that I think would have knocked me out had I not managed to literally stop the impact the moment we collided. My knee and one of my hands stung badly. It suddenly hit me how stupid this was because no one knew where I was, and I nearly incapacitated myself on a vacant trail in freezing temperatures, with it being minutes from dark nonetheless. As I sat there recovering from my fall, I decided I was close enough to shore and I just filmed right where I fell. I was about to find out that falling down was the least of my worries. "Can I borrow a light?" I nearly jumped out of my skin. I turned around and there he was. He was standing about 20 feet behind me. I replied to him that I was sorry, but that I didn't have a lighter because I didn't smoke. "I saw you getting out of your car up there. You have a real nice ass, you know." Where had he been? There seriously wasn't a soul in sight when I parked and headed down the trail. This next part you might find hard to believe because I myself still cannot grasp that there are people out there like this. But his fourth sentence to me, and within less than a minute of appearing, he said, "Hey, do you want to fuck?" I knew I was in a lot of trouble. No one would hear me if I were to scream. Sure, the Branson Belle was out in the water, but it was several football field lengths away, and I'm sure I was invisible to them. They wouldn't hear me over the sound of the massive ship anyhow. Without missing a beat, I told them that it was too cold to do it outside and we should go do it in my car. I pretended to be interested. In my mind, I just knew I needed to get off this trail before the sun went down, and obviously, I'd abandoned capturing the sunset. I don't recall all the things he said during the walk up to the parking lot, but when he asked if he could touch my butt during the walk, I agreed. I knew it was a test. I still wasn't 100% sure he was going to let me make it off the trail, and anything I could do or say to please him on that walk was my ticket out. How had I gotten myself into this awful situation? God, I was so stupid. Just let me make it out of this, and I swear I'll be smarter. He kept his hand down the back of my pants for the rest of the walk. We made it to the parking lot, but much to my disappointment, I was still the only car there other than a vehicle that wasn't parked in a real spot, and hadn't been there earlier. I knew it had to have been his car. He'd been hiding and watching me, and then he'd pulled up to the trail entrance and left his car at it before he began following me. You may ask why I didn't call 911 on the trail. Well, he was watching my every move, and I wanted to make it off the trail unharmed and alive. I figured it being below freezing was a good excuse to refuse to do what he wanted to do out there on the trail, but please him by promising to do it somewhere warmer. Unfortunately, the parking lot was far enough off the regular highway that passing cars couldn't see it. My next mission was to make it to my vehicle and escape. We were standing by his car, and he continued saying things that he was going to do to me that seemed too graphic for me to write about. I was still playing along. I tried to get his name and number out of him, but he refused on both. Why would someone refuse to give you their name? He began unzipping his pants and trying to get me to do things to him, so I insisted we walk to my SUV. First, though, he grabbed something out of his car, and I never got a good look at it, but I'm pretty sure it was a gun. We walked across the parking lot towards my car. I pushed unlock, knowing that only pushing it once would only unlock the driver's side door. I had my keys in the ready position. I jumped in as he was attempting to open the passenger door. I threw it in reverse and backed up as the tires spun on the loose gravel. Then I put it into drive and floored it. I was too afraid to look in the rearview mirror. I called 911 and gave them his description. Oddly, he was a handsome enough guy, stood about 6 foot tall, blonde hair, brown eyes, a slightly muscular build, and nice features. Probably around 25 to 30 years old. You wouldn't necessarily look at him and think anything remarkable or otherwise. I wasn't ever in a position to see his license plate, but I told him about his car. He drove an older, probably early 90s pale blue car. It reminded me of my great-grandfather's Oldsmobile. I didn't even have a first name to give them. After taking down my information, I never heard from anyone regarding my report again. I may never know what exactly he has done, but I do know that I sensed the presence of absolute evil that evening. August in 2020, I had moved in with my aunt and uncle to an insanely small rural town in California. When I first moved there, a friend of mine had made it a point to show me that someone could drive across the whole town within 5 minutes, and at the time, I didn't realize how important that fact would become to the safety of me and my loved ones. My best friend Haley and I, her 17 and me being 18 at the time, were hanging out at a park that was about 5 to 10 minute walk from where I lived. And I say park because there were a few tables and benches and it was technically known as a town park. But in reality, it was more a small grass clearing surrounded by woods and a dirt trail near the bank of a river. I had started to frequent this place after moving, walking down to the benches and trail to smoke or sit by the water. I had never really noticed any suspicious characters before this, even though I had been plenty warned about a couple creepers that were in the area, known for bothering young girls. Haley and I had been smoking for a bit, unbothered in the clearing, when we decided to finish our trip with exploring the trail a little bit and just taking in the scenery. We had been walking and talking for about 5 minutes when I started to get this tension in my shoulders, like that feeling you get when you know someone is looking at you. I had looked behind us and there was a man on the trail with us. Granted, this path is pressed right against the sidewall of a gated community, so seeing people going on walks and jogging was fairly common. I told my friend of the man's presence, but she had written it off as me being anxious. But she had a good point. I tend to be a bit hyper-aware at times, but something about this man felt wrong in my gut. We kept walking, and I would periodically look back and keep tab on the dark-haired middle-aged man, walking about 50 feet behind us. After not long at all, the man started picking up his pace. Calm, casual walking became more of a speed walk, and I turned around completely and started walking backwards to try and communicate to this man that I was completely aware of his presence. He had made it towards the side of the trail, looking like he was going to walk through the brush, down the river, and I felt a bit stupid. I turned back around, walking forward again, but as I was looking behind us for the last time, I see the man in a full sprint coming back onto the trail, straight for me and Haley. I grabbed her sleeve with one hand and ripped out a pocket knife with the other, and I can't remember what I had said to her, but we started sprinting down the trail as well. I had never gone very far down the path, and I had no idea where it was going to take us, but the man running after us was blocking our path back to the clearing and the road, and we could hear his footsteps on the dirt getting closer. I let go of Haley's sleeve so I could pull my phone out and called my uncle as we were running. I told him we were being followed on the trail at the park, but I couldn't tell him exactly where on the trail because I had never been much further than the entrance, and I had no idea where it led to. My uncle had told me to stay on the phone and be so loud that he could find me. I let out the loudest, shrillest scream I could, and I kept running until we reached what was the clear end of the path. We ran up an old metal fence surrounding trees and what looked like an old abandoned house or shed. We had also reached the back corner of the outer wall for the gated community, and in that split second, this seemed to be our best bet. I ripped us off the dirt path into some trees lining the cement wall and yelled at Haley to climb as fast as she could, pushing her from the bottom so she could use a tree in the ledge to clear the top of the wall. I tossed my pocket knife and phone over, and I'm not even sure how I scaled the wall myself, but I scrambled up and over, as fast as physically possible. I landed next to Haley, basically face first, onto a neatly trimmed patch of grass inside the gated community, scaring a poor man who seemed to just be outside walking his dog. I became really aware of how strange we probably seemed. Two teenagers, panicking and yelling while holding a knife. But this man seemed to know we were in trouble. He came over to ask us what was happening and if we needed anything. And Haley started explaining our disruption to his calm neighborhood, while I got back on the phone with my uncle, and told him that we made it to the gated community. Not even a minute later, my uncle came barreling towards the end of the path, and we could hear him shouting to the man on the trail that he had a firearm, and all the things he was going to do with it. The man with his dog led us to a little access gate, a ways back on the wall, and unlocked it for us, so we could meet my uncle on the path. My uncle told us that he had driven his car through the park all the way up to the trail entrance as fast as he could and started running for us, but he didn't see any men as he was going. He checked on us, and I retold him what had happened with more detail than I could have managed in my initial panic. He escorted us back down the trail to the car, firearm in full sight, at the ready in case the man on the trail decided to reveal himself. We didn't see him on our walk back, and I haven't returned to this place since then. But any time that I had left the house before I eventually moved, I was constantly paranoid I was being followed. We were never able to figure out who this man was, and I haven't seen him since that day. So I, my boyfriend, his best friend, and his girlfriend drove up to Big Bear on June 26th. Then a day later, another friend of ours drove on the 27th, and he was supposed to sleep downstairs, since there are only 2 bedrooms. The first night we stayed there, it was kind of creepy because the cabin was pretty remote, and of course, there were absolutely no lights outside. It is the woods with coyotes howling and bears, but nonetheless, completely normal activity. On the 27th, around 12 a.m., my boyfriend and I are in bed when suddenly our friend sleeping downstairs comes banging on the door, freaking out, saying he saw shadows in the woods and that the motion light came on and there was thumping outside. We got a little freaked, but my boyfriend got out of bed and checked the entire cabin and even went outside. Nothing. We go up to the other couple's room, where there's a porch with a sliding glass door that looks out to the woods. It's important to note that I am naturally very anxious and a scared person, while my boyfriend is a rock. He is calm and logical, while I tend to jump to the worst case scenario. My boyfriend goes over to check the last place in the cabin, so he pulls the curtain and jumps and yells, "Oh no!" At this point, I'm terrified. My boyfriend is a 180-pound CrossFit coach, and to see a big guy like that scared is nauseating. He locked the door and backed away slowly. He He quietly says, "There's a large man standing outside staring at us. He's just standing in the woods looking at us." At this point, I'm thinking he's fucking with me. He looks at me and says, "Go lock the door, now." That's when I knew he was serious. Everyone is of course freaking out. I run and lock the door behind us, and we all decide to stay in the room to keep an eye out. It's the middle of summer, and it's really hot, but we refuse to open a window. I'm so scared, but trying not to show it, as everyone else seems to have calmed down. About 30 minutes go by, and nothing happens. I get annoyed with the heat, and the fact that there's 5 people in a tiny room, and 3 of them are men, so my boyfriend and I go back to our room. I'm still pretty spooked, so my boyfriend tries to cheer me up. At this point, it's about 1:30 a.m. I told him that I was too scared to sleep with the lights off, and he tells me that it's fine. And he understands, so we just lay with the lights completely on. Finally, I start drifting to sleep when I hear a thud. I sit up and look at my boyfriend. He looks at me. Then the power cuts. I immediately start crying, and I'm trembling, and I can't see anything because it's pitch black. I try to get out of bed and run, but my legs are tangled in the sheets, and I fall. My boyfriend picks me up, and we grab our phones and run to the other room where everyone else was staying. I'm completely hysterical at this point. I try to contact our host, but nothing will go through. I try to call my dad, but all of our phones say no service. We are alone out there. Thank goodness the friend who drove up after us had a different carrier because his phone had 1 bar. So he calls the local sheriff. I realize now it might be a bit of an overreaction, but at the time we kind of thought we were going to die. He's on the phone with the sheriff, and they transfer us to the utilities company. We give the address, and they tell us that we are too far in the woods, and they don't cover that area. At this point, we are wondering if the entire area has no power, or if the man outside had just cut our power. We call 911 to report suspicious activity and a power outage. They send the fire department. A few hours go by, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and suddenly the power comes back on. We fall asleep, and the next day we talk to some locals of the area. We told them our power went out, and he said that was strange and that shouldn't have happened. He told us the only reason that happens out here is because of a snowstorm. He said he couldn't explain it.